The biology lab door exploded open with such force that glass beakers rattled on their shelves. 25-year-old Miss Skylar Bennett's hand froze over the microscope. She was adjusting as three varsity wrestlers burst into her classroom. Their massive frames blocking the fluorescent light, the leader's knuckles were already white from clenching his fists, and the look in his eyes made every student in the room stop breathing. But what shocked everyone wasn't his rage. It was the way their petite new teacher calmly set down her equipment and shifted into a stance none of them recognized yet. Miss Bennett. Grayson Parker growled, his 200-pound frame casting a shadow across her desk. The 18-year-old wrestling captain's jaw twitched as he slammed both palms on her desk, making her coffee mug jump. "We need to talk about my grade. Now." Behind him, Colton Reed and Hunter Vaughn spread out, forming a semicircle that trapped her between them and the wall of preserved specimens. The smell of formaldehyde, mixed with their aggressive cologne, created a suffocating atmosphere that made several students in the front row lean back. Skylar didn't move from her position by the microscope. Her breathing remained steady, controlled, something she'd learned during 8 years of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training that nobody at Ridgemont High knew about. "Gentlemen, you're disrupting my 7th period class. Whatever concerns you have can be addressed during my office hours at 3:30 p.m. No." Grayson took another step forward, close enough that she could see the veins pulsing in his neck. "You failed my lab report. That's going to cost me my wrestling scholarship. You're fixing it right now." 28 students sat frozen in their seats, some already recording on their phones hidden beneath their desks. They'd only known Miss Bennett for 2 weeks, but that was long enough to witness Grayson Parker's reign of terror. Son of the district attorney, state wrestling champion, untouchable. "Your lab report contained fabricated data," Skylar stated clearly, her voice carrying the kind of calm that comes before a storm. "The enzyme reaction rates you reported are scientifically impossible." "The grade stands," Colton laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off the walls lined with anatomy posters. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin people's futures? You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Skylar replied, subtly shifting her weight to the balls of her feet. "3 students who think intimidation will change academic standards." "You're wrong." Hunter moved to her left, trying to flank her while she was focused on Grayson. His hand reached for the stack of graded lab reports on her desk, a mistake he'd regret in about 3 seconds. Without taking her eyes off Grayson, Skylar's hand shot out, catching Hunter's wrist in a grip that made him yelp. In one fluid motion, she guided his momentum past her, using a classic Brazilian Jiu Jitsu wrist control that sent him stumbling into a lab stool. "Don't touch my desk," she said quietly, releasing him with a gentle push that nonetheless left him rubbing his wrist in shock. The classroom erupted in whispers. Madison Torres, one of her AP biology students, whispered to her lab partner, "Did she just... Holy crap." River Coleman breathed, their phone now openly recording. "She's trained." Grayson's face flushed dark red, the kind of color that preceded violence. "You just put your hands on a student. My dad's going to destroy you. You're done teaching. You're done in this town." Skylar picked up her phone from the desk, her movements deliberate and calm. "Actually, I defended my property from attempted theft, and this entire interaction is being recorded by the classroom security camera." She pointed to the corner where a red light blinked steadily. "Now, you have 2 choices. Leave my classroom immediately, or I call security. Choose." For 10 seconds that felt like 10 minutes. The standoff held. Hunter was still rubbing his wrist, looking between Grayson and the door. Colton's bravado had evaporated, replaced by uncertainty. They were used to teachers who cowered, who negotiated, who could be intimidated or bought. Miss Bennett was neither. "This isn't over." Grayson snarled, backing toward the door. "You just declared war on the wrong family? My father runs this district. The school board does what he says. You'll be gone by Monday." "We'll see," Skylar replied, already turning back to her microscope, as if they were no more significant than a minor interruption. After they left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the periodic table poster, she addressed her class without missing a beat. "Now, where were we? Ah yes, the role of ATP in cellular respiration. Madison, would you read the next paragraph?" But her steady hands were that way for a different reason than her students assumed. She knew this was only the beginning. Bullies like Grayson didn't give up after one confrontation. They escalated. She was ready for whatever came next. That afternoon, Skylar sat in her empty classroom organizing lab equipment when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your car." Biology, bitch. Through her second-floor window overlooking the faculty parking lot, she could see a crowd gathering around her silver Honda Accord. Her stomach tightened, but she forced herself to not run to the parking area. The damage was worse than she'd imagined. Red spray paint covered her windshield with obscene words. All 4 tires had been slashed. The side mirrors hung by wires, and someone had keyed deep scratches along every panel. Oh my God. Miss Bennett, Faith Martinez, one of her sophomore students, rushed over with tears in her eyes. I saw them doing it from the library. I tried to record it, but they saw me and it's okay. Faith. Skylar pulled out her phone, methodically photographing every angle of the damage. Are you hurt? Did they threaten you? Faith shook her head but glanced around nervously. Hunter said if I told anyone, they'd make my life hell. But this is wrong. You're the first teacher who actually cares about us learning. Other students began gathering, their phones out, documenting the vandalism. Within minutes, #Ridgemont Bullies was trending on local social media. You need to report this, Madison said, appearing at Skylar's elbow. My mom's a lawyer. This is criminal vandalism, intimidation, harassment. I appreciate that. Madison, Skylar interrupted gently. But I've dealt with bullies before. The key is patience and documentation. The next morning, Skylar arrived early to find her classroom door covered with printed screenshots from a fake Instagram account someone had created overnight. The posts were vile doctored photos, racist comments, false allegations about inappropriate relationships with students. Each image was watermarked with her name. She calmly photographed each paper before removing them, adding them to a folder she'd started labeled evidence. Years of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu had taught her that the best fighters were patient ones. You waited for your opponent to make mistakes, to overextend, to give you the opening you needed. During second period, her projector suddenly displayed inappropriate images in the middle of her PowerPoint on cell division. Someone had hacked into her computer remotely. She switched it off without panic, continuing her lesson using the whiteboard, while several students gasped at the harassment. That's messed up. River muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Grayson's crew is going too far. At lunch, Vice Principal Morrison called her to his office, a thin man with nervous hands who always smelled of stale coffee. He couldn't meet her eyes as he spoke. Miss Bennett, we've had some complaints about your teaching methods, specifically about the incident yesterday with the Parker boy. Skylar sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. You mean when 3 students burst into my classroom making threats and attempting to steal graded papers? Morrison fidgeted with his tie. The boys say you attacked Hunter Vaughn. Unprovoked. That's a serious allegation. There are 28 witnesses and security footage that show exactly what happened. Skylar replied evenly. Hunter attempted to take papers from my desk. I used minimal force to prevent theft. Would you like me to pull up the video? That won't be necessary. Morrison's fidgeting intensified. Look, I'm trying to help you here. The Parker family has significant influence in Silver Creek. Grayson's father basically handpicked half the school board. Maybe if you reconsidered the grade, apologized for the misunderstanding. Are you asking me to change a grade on a plagiarized assignment and apologize to students who vandalized my car? Skylar's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Morrison paled. Vandalized? I haven't heard anything about. Really? Skylar pulled out her phone, showing him the photos, because half the student body saw it happen. I'll be filing a police report this afternoon. Now, let's not be hasty. Morrison stammered. I'm sure this was just a prank that got out of hand. Boys will be boys. No need to involve law enforcement. Skylar stood slowly. Mr. Morrison, I'm documenting this conversation. You've just asked me to change a grade under pressure and discouraged me from reporting criminal vandalism. That's academic fraud and potentially obstruction of justice. Would you like to reconsider your position? The vice principal's face went from pale to ashen. That's not. I never said. Good. Then we're done here. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. Oh. And Mr. Morrison? The next time someone hacks into my classroom computer to display pornographic images to minors, I'll be contacting the FBI's cybercrime division. That's a federal offense. She left him sputtering in his office, knowing she'd just painted an even bigger target on her back. But some battles were worth fighting. Especially when her students were watching, they needed to see that standing up to wrong was possible. Even when the system was stacked against you, Thursday brought new levels of harassment. Her faculty parking spot was blocked by Grayson's massive pickup truck. When she parked elsewhere, she returned to find her windshield covered in vulgar stickers that took 45 minutes to remove. During fifth period, the fire alarm went off 3 times. Each time traced to poles near her classroom. Someone had called in a false complaint to the health department, claiming she was keeping dangerous chemicals improperly stored. An inspector showed up during her AP class, disrupting the lesson for 30 minutes before concluding everything was in perfect order. But the worst part was watching how it affected her other students. They were jumpy, distracted, afraid to participate in class discussions. The culture of fear that Grayson and his crew had cultivated was spreading like a virus. Miss Bennett. Faith approached her desk after school, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to thank you for standing up to them. Nobody ever does that. Skylar looked at the girl, noticing for the first time the way she hunched her shoulders, made herself small. Have they bothered you before? Faith? Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. Last year, I reported Colton for cornering me in the equipment room after gym class. Nothing happened. His dad golfs with the principal. They said I was being dramatic, that he was just being friendly. Rage flowed through Skylar's veins like liquid fire, but she kept her expression gentle. I'm sorry that happened to you. That was wrong, and the adults who should have protected you failed, but things are going to change. That night, Skylar sat in her small apartment reviewing everything she'd documented. Photos, videos, witness statements, a paper trail of systematic harassment and administrative corruption. She thought about Faith, about all the students who'd suffered in silence because the system protected predators instead of victims. She made a decision. Friday morning arrived with storm clouds that matched the tension in the air. Skylar entered school with a different, energy-focused, purposeful, ready. Her students noticed immediately. You okay? Miss B? River asked as she arranged materials for first period. Perfect, she replied, and something in her tone made several students exchange glances. 20 minutes into first period, Grayson strutted in late as usual, not even bothering with an excuse. He dropped into his seat with exaggerated casualness, legs spread wide, taking up as much space as possible. Mr. Parker, Skylar said without looking up from the lab manual she was reading. You're late. That's detention. The class went silent. Nobody gave Grayson Parker detention. Nobody. He laughed, harsh and dismissive. Yeah, right. I've got wrestling practice. Then you'll miss it. Skylar replied calmly. Detention today. My classroom. 3:30 p.m. Grayson stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You can't. I can, and I did. Sit down or leave. But if you leave, don't come back without a parent conference scheduled. His face went purple with rage. You think you're tough? You have no idea what my family can do to you. My dad will have your teaching license revoked. You'll never work again. Is that a threat? Mr. Parker? Skylar finally looked up, meeting his eyes with calm intensity. Because I'm recording this conversation, and threats against teachers are grounds for expulsion. Recording? His voice cracked slightly. You can't record without page 4 of the syllabus you signed. Section 3. All classroom interactions may be recorded for safety and educational purposes. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Your father's a district attorney. I'm sure he explained the importance of reading contracts before signing them. The barb hit home. Grayson's fists clenched and unclenched as he struggled for control. He glanced at his friends, but Hunter was nursing a bruised ego, and Colton looked uncertain. They were used to teachers who folded under pressure, who could be intimidated into submission. Sight down. Grayson, Skylar said quietly, or leave. Last warning. The standoff stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Students held their breath, phones discreetly recording under their desks. This was the moment everyone could feel it. Grayson grabbed his backpack and stormed toward the door. This isn't over. You just signed your death warrant in this town. After he left, slamming the door hard enough to crack the frame, Skylar calmly returned to her lesson, but she could see the mixture of awe and fear in her students' eyes. They'd just witnessed something unprecedented, a teacher standing up to the untouchable Grayson Parker. Miss Bennett. Madison raised her hand, voice shaking slightly. He's not going to let this go. His dad? The school board? They'll come after you. Skylar set down her marker and looked at her students. Really looked at them. She saw fear. Yes, but also something else. Hope. You're right, Madison. They probably will. But here's what you need to understand. Bullies maintain power through fear. They count on good people staying silent, on systems, protecting them instead of victims. The only way that changes is when someone says, enough. She paused, making eye contact with each student. I'm not telling you to fight. I'm not encouraging violence. But I am showing you that standing up for what's right is possible, even when the odds are against you, even when the system is rigged. Faith raised her hand tentatively. But what if? What if they do something worse? What if they... Her question was cut off by the classroom door bursting open again. But this time, it wasn't Grayson. Principal Coleman entered, followed by 3 members of the school board and a man in an expensive suit who could only be District Attorney Parker himself. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miss Bennett, Coleman began, his voice formal and cold. We need to discuss your inappropriate treatment of certain students. Skylar stood slowly, every movement controlled and deliberate. She recognized the setup. They were trying to intimidate her in front of her students, to make an example of her. Of course, she replied calmly. Shall we step into the hallway? I wouldn't want to disrupt my students' education. This won't take long. District Attorney Parker stepped forward, his presence filling the room like a dark cloud. He was an older version of his son, same broad shoulders, same cruel eyes, same assumption of superiority. You've been harassing my son, creating a hostile learning environment, making false accusations. I've been holding your son accountable for plagiarism and enforcing standard classroom rules. Skylar interrupted, her voice steady. Everything is documented. Parker's eyes narrowed. Documentation can be interpreted many ways. Miss Bennett, security footage can malfunction. Witnesses can be unreliable. You're new here. So let me explain how things work in Silver Creek. He stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over her. The school board members shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Principal Coleman stared at the floor. Teachers who cause problems don't last long here. Parker continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried throughout the silent classroom. They find their contracts aren't renewed. Their credentials get questioned. Sometimes they even face legal challenges that drain their savings and destroy their reputations. Skylar didn't step back, didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled a fighter's smile that made several students sit up straighter. Are you threatening me, Mr. Parker? Because unlike your son, you should know better. Coercion, intimidation of a witness, abuse of power. These are serious charges for a district attorney. Parker's face darkened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Little girl. Actually, I do. Skylar reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Harrison Construction's bid rigging scandal. Judge Mitchell's DUI cover-up. The missing funds from the Youth Sports League your wife manages. Would you like me to continue? The room went absolutely silent. Parker's face went from red to white in the span of 3 seconds. See, Skylar continued conversationally. I spent 10 years as a forensic accountant before becoming a teacher. Amazing what you can find in public records when you know where to look. Now, would you like to continue threatening me in front of 28 witnesses? Or would you prefer to leave my classroom? Parker's jaw worked soundlessly. The school board members suddenly found urgent reasons to check their phones. Coleman looked like he might faint. This isn't over. Parker finally managed. His voice strangled. No. Skylar agreed. It's just beginning. Because I've already sent copies of my documentation to the State Education Board, the Attorney General's office, and 3 major news outlets. They're very interested in the culture of corruption at Ridgemont High. She paused, letting that sink in. Oh, and Mr. Parker, If anything happens to May, if I have an accident, if evidence mysteriously disappears, if I'm suddenly facing false charges, me attorney has instructions to release everything. I believe they call that a dead man's switch." Parker backed toward the door, his composure completely shattered. The others followed quickly, none of them willing to meet her eyes. After they left, the classroom exploded in shocked whispers. Madison was staring at her with something approaching awe. River's mouth hung open. Faith had tears streaming down her face. "Did you really find all that stuff?" someone asked. Skylar smiled. A real smile this time. "Public records are available to anyone who looks. The trick is knowing what patterns to search for." "But weren't you scared?" Faith whispered. "Terrified," Skylar admitted. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear." The bell rang, but nobody moved. They all sensed they'd witnessed something pivotal, a moment that would reshape everything at Ridgemont High. As students finally began filing out, Madison lingered. "Miss Bennett, what you just did, Grayson's going to go nuclear. Him and his crew, they don't handle humiliation well." Skylar nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, which is why I need you all to be careful. Stay in groups. Document everything. And if anyone threatens you..." Her words were cut off by a commotion in the hallway. Shouting, the sound of lockers slamming, someone screaming. Skylar rushed out to find Grayson cornering Faith against the lockers. His face twisted with rage. "You little snitch? You've been talking to that bitch teacher, haven't you? Telling lies about..." "Step away from her, Grayson." Skylar's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He spun around, his eyes wild. "You! This is all your fault. You're poisoning everyone against me." I said, "Step away from her." Skylar moved forward, her stance shifting subtly into a defensive position. "Or what?" Grayson laughed, ugly and sharp. "You'll use your little martial arts tricks? Go ahead. Hit me. Give me a reason to sue you into oblivion." That's when Skylar noticed Colton and Hunter flanking her, trying to box her in against the lockers. Other students were gathering, phones out, recording everything. "I won't need to hit you," Skylar said calmly. "You're about to assault a teacher in front of 50 witnesses. Your father won't be able to cover that up." Grayson's face contorted with rage. He raised his fist, telegraphing the punch like an amateur. Skylar didn't need to think. Height years of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu made her response automatic. She slipped inside his punch, her hand guiding his momentum past her. In the same movement, she stepped behind him, her foot sweeping his ankle. Grayson's own force, combined with the trip, sent him crashing to the floor. Before Colton or Hunter could react, she'd pivoted to face them, hands up in a defensive position that looked almost casual, but left no openings. "Don't," she said simply. They froze. Grayson groaned from the floor, trying to process how he'd ended up there. The hallway was dead silent except for the sound of 50 phones recording. "Are you okay, Faith?" Skylar asked without taking her eyes off the other two boys. "Yes," Faith stammered. "Good. Go to the office. Report what just happened." Skylar's voice remained calm. "Professional. Colton. Hunter, help your friend up. He seems to have tripped." As they scrambled to help Grayson to his feet, Skylar heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Security guards rounded the corner, followed by Principal Coleman. "What's going on here?" Coleman demanded. Before anyone could answer, Madison stepped forward. Grayson Parker just assaulted Faith Martinez and attempted to punch Miss Bennett. She defended herself. "We all saw it. We all recorded it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Phones waved in the air like digital witnesses. Coleman's face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. "Mr. Parker, Mr. Reed, Mr. Vaughn, me office. Now." As security escorted them away, Grayson turned back, his face twisted with hatred. "This isn't over." Skylar met his gaze steadily. "No, but your reign of terror is..." The hallway erupted in spontaneous applause. Students who'd lived in fear for years were finally seeing justice. Faith threw herself into Skylar's arms, sobbing with relief. But Skylar knew this was far from over. She'd won the battle, but the war for Ridgemont High's soul was just beginning. The Parkers wouldn't go down without a fight, and they had resources she could only imagine as students dispersed, heading to their next classes with a new energy. River approached her. "Miss B, what happens now?" Skylar looked down the hallway where maintenance was already working to repair the cracked door frame from this morning. Now we see if this school is ready for real change, or if the system protects its own. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. Parker owns this town. You'll regret this. She deleted it and turned back to River. Change is never easy, but it's necessary, and sometimes one person standing up is all it takes to start an avalanche. As she headed back to her classroom, Skylar couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was still gathering. The Parkers had too much to lose to give up easily, but for the first time in Ridgemont High's history, they'd met someone who wouldn't back down. Someone who knew that real strength wasn't about physical power, it was about having the courage to do what's right. Even when the entire system was against you, the war for Ridgemont High was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with an eerie calm that made Skylar Bennett's skin prickle with anticipation. The parking lot was unusually empty when she arrived at 7 a.m. And the few students she passed in the hallway avoided eye contact. Something was wrong. She found out when she reached her classroom. The door had been removed from its hinges, leaving a gaping entrance. Inside, chaos. Every piece of lab equipment had been smashed. Microscopes lay in pieces. Beakers shattered across the floor. And her computer had been gutted, its components scattered like electronic entrails. But it was the message spray-painted across the whiteboard that made her blood run cold. Last warning, leave or burn. Oh my God. Madison Torres gasped from the doorway. River Coleman right behind her. Miss B, this is, call 911. Skylar said calmly, already documenting everything with her phone. Nobody enters until the police process the scene. Within 30 minutes, the hallway was crawling with law enforcement. Detective Sarah Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, surveyed the damage with professional detachment. Any idea who might have done this? She asked. Though her tone suggested she already knew, I have suspicions. Skylar replied carefully. There's been escalating harassment since I reported academic fraud involving Grayson Parker. Detective Walsh nodded slowly. The D.A. Son, we've had difficulties pursuing cases involving that family. She lowered her voice. Between you and me, half the department is in Parker's pocket, but I'm not. Keep documenting everything. Principal Coleman arrived, face flushed and breathing hard. Miss Bennett, I just heard. This is terrible. Absolutely terrible. We'll have you set up in a temporary classroom by... No. Skylar's voice cut through his nervous rambling. I'll teach here. Exactly as it is. Let every student see what happens when someone stands up to corruption. But the safety hazard, I'll sweep the glass. My students can handle seeing reality. She turned to the growing crowd of students. This is what fear looks like when it's cornered. Destruction instead of dialogue. Violence instead of accountability. Faith Martinez pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. They did this because of Friday. Because you protected me. No, Skylar said firmly. They did this because they're losing power and don't know how to handle it. This isn't your fault. Faith, this is what bullies do when their intimidation stops working. By the time first period started, Skylar had swept a clear path through the debris. Students filed in silently, taking in the destruction with wide eyes. She taught from memory, using the vandalized whiteboard as a backdrop, turning the destruction into a lesson about resilience. Science, she said, gesturing at the broken equipment, is about observing, hypothesizing, and adapting. Today, we observe what fear does when challenged. Our hypothesis? That standing together is stronger than standing alone? Let's test it. The lesson was interrupted by Vice Principal Morrison, who beckoned her into the hallway. His hands shook as he spoke. The school board has called an emergency meeting. They're discussing your termination. Parker's threatening to pull district funding if you're not gone by the end of the week. Skylar studied his nervous face. And where do you stand? Mr. Morrison? He looked away. I have a family. A mortgage. I can't afford to make enemies with corrupt officials who vandalize classrooms and terrorize children. Skylar finished. I understand. Fear is a powerful motivator. But so is doing what's right. She left him in the hallway and returned to her class, where Madison had taken over, explaining cellular respiration to the younger students. The sight filled Skylar with pride. Her students were already learning to stand up, to lead. During lunch, Skylar's phone rang. An unknown number with a state capital area code. Miss Bennett? This is Director Patricia Morgan from the State Education Board. We've been monitoring the situation at Ridgemont High. The documentation you sent is explosive. We're opening a formal investigation. But I need to warn you, the Parkers have connections at the state level too. Please be careful. I understand. Thank you for taking this seriously. Thank you for having the courage to report it. Teachers like you are why I took this job. After hanging up, Skylar noticed a commotion in the cafeteria. Grayson, Colton, and Hunter had returned to school despite their Friday suspension. Surrounding a table of freshman students, their body language screamed intimidation. Skylar moved without thinking, crossing the cafeteria in quick strides. As she approached, she heard Grayson's voice. Anyone who talks to that bitch teacher is a snitch. And you know what happens to snitches at Ridgemont? Step away from them. Skylar's voice carried across the cafeteria, causing heads to turn. Grayson spun around, his face lighting up with cruel satisfaction. Perfect timing. Everyone needs to see what happens to teachers who don't know their place. He lunged at her, no telegraphed punch, this time, but a wrestler's tackle designed to take her to the ground. But Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was built for ground fighting, and Skylar had been preparing for this moment. She sprawled backward, using his momentum against him while wrapping her arm around his neck in a guillotine choke position. As they hit the ground, she transitioned smoothly, ending up in full mount position with Grayson face down, his arm locked behind him in a controlled hold. Stop fighting, she said calmly as he struggled. You're only hurting yourself. Colton and Hunter started forward but froze as the entire cafeteria rose to its feet. Hundreds of students, phones out, formed a protective circle. Touch her, and you deal with all of us, River announced, voice steady, despite their obvious fear. For the first time in Ridgemont High's history, the bullied outnumbered the bullies. Security arrived, followed by Principal Coleman and several police officers. Skylar released Grayson, who scrambled to his feet, face red with humiliation and rage. She attacked me, he screamed. Everyone saw it. I want her arrested. Actually, Detective Walsh said, reviewing footage on a student's phone, I see a clear case of self-defense. Mr. Parker, you're under arrest for assault, violating a suspension, and criminal threatening. As they cuffed him, Grayson's father burst through the cafeteria doors, his expensive suit and furious expression making students scatter. Don't say a word. Son, Detective Walsh, you're making a career-ending mistake. No, sir. Walsh replied evenly, I'm enforcing the law, something that should have happened years ago. Parker turned his venom on Skylar. You think you've won? I'll bury you in lawsuits. I'll make sure you never teach again. I'll destroy everything you care about. Mr. Parker. A new voice interrupted. A woman in a federal agent's windbreaker entered the cafeteria. I'm Agent Jennifer Chen, FBI. We need to discuss your threats against a witness in our ongoing investigation into corruption and racketeering in Silver Creek. The cafeteria went dead silent. Parker's face drained of color. What investigation? He stammered. The one that started when Miss Bennett sent us extensive documentation of bid rigging, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Agent Chen smiled coldly. Your threat just added witness intimidation to the charges. I suggest you contact your lawyer. As federal agents escorted both Parkers out, the cafeteria erupted in stunned conversation. Students hugged each other, some crying with relief. The reign of terror was ending, but Skylar knew it wasn't over. The infection ran deep at Ridgemont High. That afternoon, an emergency school board meeting packed the auditorium. Parents filled every seat, demanding answers. The 5-member board sat at a long table on stage, looking increasingly uncomfortable as parent after parent stood to speak. My daughter was afraid to come to school for 3 years, one mother said, voice shaking with anger. She reported harassment 5 times. Nothing was done because the perpetrator was on the wrestling team. My son's grades mysteriously dropped after he refused to help athletes cheat. A father added, when we complained, we were told he was being dramatic. Story after story of corruption, intimidation, and failure. The board members shifted uncomfortably. especially when several parents mentioned lawsuits. Board President Harasono, relation to the mayor, finally spoke. We hear your concerns. Effective immediately. We're suspending Principal Coleman and Vice Principal Morrison pending investigation. We're also implementing new policies. Policies aren't enough. Schuyler stood, commanding attention. Policies without enforcement are just paper. You need systematic change. New leadership, transparency, and consequences for those who enabled this culture. And who do you suggest lead this change? Board member Patricia Williams asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Someone who's proven they'll stand up to corruption. Schuyler replied, someone who puts students first. I'm not asking for the job, but I am demanding real change. The meeting continued for 2 hours, with the board eventually voting to request state oversight and to implement sweeping reforms. As people filed out, Schuyler felt a hand on her shoulder. Miss Bennett? An older woman with kind eyes extended her hand. I'm retired, Superintendent Dorothy Chen. I've been watching this unfold. The board just asked me to come out of retirement to help clean up this mess. I could use someone like you on my team. Before Schuyler could respond, her phone buzzed urgently. Madison's name on the screen. Miss B, you need to get to the parking lot. Now. They're planning something. Schuyler ran. Dorothy Chen and several parents following. In the parking lot, they found Colton and Hunter Reed along with 6 other wrestlers surrounding Schuyler's replacement rental car. They had baseball bats. Stop right there. Schuyler commanded, but she could see the desperation in their eyes. With Grayson arrested and their protection crumbling, they were making one last violent stand. Hunter smirked. No cameras out here. No witnesses. Just an accident in a dark parking lot. Wrong. Rivers' voice called out. The parking lot lights flickered on, revealing dozens of students stationed at strategic points, all recording. We've got every angle covered. You think we care about videos? Colton snarled, raising his bat. Our lives are already ruined because of her. Your lives are ruined because of your choices. Faith said, stepping out from behind a car. Miss Bennett just held up a mirror. You didn't like what you saw. The wrestlers looked around, realizing they were vastly outnumbered. The hunter had become the hunted. It's over. Schuyler said quietly, put down the bats. Walk away. You can still choose a different path. For a moment, the parking lot held its breath. Then Hunter threw his bat aside, shoulders slumping in defeat. One by one, the others followed. We're sorry, Hunter said, voice barely audible. We didn't know any other way to be. There's always another way, Schuyler replied. It just takes courage to find it. As police arrived to take statements, Dorothy Chen stood beside Schuyler. I've been in education for 40 years. I've never seen anything like what you've accomplished here in just 3 weeks. I didn't accomplish it, Schuyler said, watching her students coordinate with law enforcement like professionals. They did. I just showed them it was possible. The next morning, Schuyler arrived to find her classroom door had been replaced reinforced steel with multiple locks. A note was taped to it. No one messes with our teacher. Your students? Inside, she found the room transformed. Parents and students had worked through the night, replacing equipment, repainting walls, and installing new security cameras. On her desk sat donations of microscopes, lab supplies, and a brand new computer. Surprise, Madison. River, Faith, and dozens of other students crowded in behind her. The community donated everything. Even some of the board members contributed. Schuyler felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. Faith said quietly, we need teachers like you. Over the following weeks, the transformation at Ridgemont High was remarkable. With Dorothy Chen's leadership and state oversight, corrupt administrators were removed, and new policies were implemented with real enforcement mechanisms. The FBI investigation expanded, uncovering a network of corruption that reached into multiple districts. District Attorney Parker was indicted on 37 counts. Several board members resigned in disgrace. The wrestling program was suspended pending a complete overhaul. Grayson Parker was expelled and faced juvenile charges, but in a letter from detention, he wrote to Schuyler, I hated you for holding me accountable. Now I realize you were the first person who ever did. Maybe it's not too late for me to change. Hunter and Colton. facing community service instead of jail time. Volunteered to speak at other schools about bullying and the culture that enabled them. Their transformation from predators to advocates was painful but genuine. Culture change doesn't happen overnight. Skylar told her AP biology class 6 months later. The room was full of engaged students, no longer afraid to participate. It takes consistent pressure. Like evolution, small changes that add up to transformation. Miss B. River raised their hand. Do you ever regret coming to Ridgemont? All the violence, the threats? Skylar looked around her classroom at Faith, now confident and outspoken, at Madison, who'd started a student advocacy group, at the former victims who now walked tall in the hallways. Every bruise was worth it. She said simply, because you all learned the most important lesson I could teach, that standing up to wrong is possible, even when the whole system is against you. Especially then, a knock at the door interrupted. Dorothy Chen entered with a tall woman in a suit. Miss Bennett. This is Superintendent Sarah Williams from the state capitol. She'd like to discuss something with you. Superintendent Williams smiled. We've been following the Ridgemont transformation closely. What you've accomplished here needs to happen statewide. We're creating a new position, Director of Student Safety and Advocacy. The job is yours if you want it. Skylar looked at her students. Seeing the mix of pride and sadness in their faces, "Can I still teach?" she asked. "We'd insist on it. Real classroom experience keeps you grounded. You'd split your time teaching here, training other teachers statewide in both safety protocols and standing up to corruption." "Including Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?" Madison asked eagerly. Williams laughed. "Especially that. We're implementing self-defense training for all educators. Miss Bennett would lead that program." After they left, Skylar's students surrounded her. "You have to take it," Faith said firmly. "Think of all the students you could help, all the bullies you could stop," River added. "All the teachers you could inspire." Madison finished. That evening, as Skylar packed up her restored classroom, she found a package on her desk. Inside was a black Belther instructor's belt from years ago with a note. "Heard what you did. Your father would be proud. A true warrior uses their strength to protect others. You honor the art. Master Chen." She held the worn belt, remembering her father's words, "The strongest fighters never have to fight, because their presence alone commands respect." Looking around her classroom one last time before summer break, Skylar smiled. She'd started the year hoping to teach biology to teenagers. Instead, she taught an entire community about courage, justice, and the power of standing together against corruption. The next week, at her first statewide training session, Skylar faced 200 teachers from across the state. Mane looked skeptical, others fearful. "I know what you're thinking," she began. "You're teachers, not fighters. But I'm here to tell you that teaching is fighting ignorance, fighting for your students' futures, and sometimes fighting the systems that fail them." She clicked to a slide showing Ridgemont High before and after. "This transformation didn't happen because I know Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It happened because one person standing up inspired others to stand with them. That's what we're building here, not just self-defense skills, but the courage to defend what's right." A hand shot up. "What if our administrators don't support us? Document everything. Know your rights. And remember, you're not alone anymore. We're creating a network of teachers who will support each other." Another hand. "What if we face violence?" Skylar smiled. "Then you'll be prepared. But more importantly, you'll project confidence that makes violence less likely. Bullies prey on fear. Take away the fear. You take away their power." Over the following months, the program expanded rapidly. Teachers learned not just physical defense but legal rights, documentation strategies, and how to build student coalitions. Reports of bullying dropped dramatically in participating schools. One evening, Skylar received an unexpected call. "Miss Bennett, this is Grayson Parker." She tensed. "Grayson, how did you get this number?" "My counselor helped me. I'm calling to thank you, and to tell you something. I'm listening. I've been working with other kids in detention, teaching them what you taught me, that strength isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting them. I started an anti-bullying program here. The counselors say it's making a real difference." Skylar sat down heavily. "Processing this? That's wonderful. Grayson, I know I can't undo the harm I caused, but maybe I can prevent others from making my mistakes. You showed me that change is possible, even for someone like me. After hanging up, Skylar sat in the quiet of her apartment, reflecting on the journey. From a terrified new teacher facing down 3 wrestlers to a statewide advocate transforming education, it had been a brutal, beautiful evolution. Her phone buzzed, a message from Faith. Now a senior and student body president, Miss B, wanted you to know 0 bullying incidents reported this month. First time in Ridgemont history. You did this. Skylar typed back, No, Faith, we did this. Together. The next morning, she stood before another group of teachers, demonstrating a defensive stance, but she wasn't just teaching them to protect themselves physically, she was teaching them to protect their students' futures, to stand against corruption, to be the warriors their schools needed. Remember, she said, adjusting a nervous teacher's stance, the goal isn't to fight, it's to be so prepared, so confident, so united that the fight never happens. That's true strength. As the session ended, a young teacher approached. She couldn't have been more than 22, fresh out of college. Reminding Skylar of herself not so long ago, I'm starting at a school with a terrible bullying problem, the young woman said. I'm terrified. Skylar put a hand on her shoulder. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But don't let it paralyze you. You're not alone. None of us are anymore. She handed the young teacher a card with her personal number. When things get toughened, they will call me, day or night. That's what this network is for. As the young teacher walked away, standing a little taller, Skylar knew the ripples of change would continue spreading. Each teacher trained would inspire students, each student empowered would stand up for others. The culture of fear that had gripped schools for generations was finally breaking. Later that evening, at Ridgemont High's graduation ceremony, Skylar sat in the audience as Faith Martinez gave the valedictorian speech. After the ceremony, Dorothy Chen found her in the crowd. You know, in my 40 years of education, I've seen a lot of reforms come and go. But this, what you started, it's different. It's lasting because it came from the ground up. From people finding their courage, it's just the beginning. Skylar replied, watching graduates take photos together, every school has its Grayson, its corrupt administrators, its culture of silence. But now they also have teachers who know how to fight back. Students who know they deserve better. A year later, at the National Education Conference, Skylar stood before thousands of educators as she received the Excellence in Education Award. But she didn't stand alone. Beside her were Faith, Madison, River, and a dozen other students who had helped transform Ridgemont High. This award doesn't belong to me, she said into the microphone. It belongs to every student who found their voice, every teacher who found their courage, every community that chose change over comfort. We proved that bullying isn't inevitable, that corruption can be exposed, that fear can be conquered. She paused, looking out at the sea of Faith teachers who would return to their schools with new tools, new confidence, new hope. The fight isn't over. It never is. But now we fight together, and together, we're unstoppable. The applause shook the convention center, but for Skylar, the real victory was in the text messages, flooding her phone from teachers reporting successful interventions, from students thanking her for inspiring their teachers, from former bullies working to make amends. The revolution in education had begun, and there was no stopping it now.